So to finalize this application here, it would be nice if we could also remove places from down there by clicking on them. And for that, I got an endpoint in this dummy backend code. We can send delete requests to this path to delete favorite places. Now, what's special about this route is that it actually doesn't take any request body, but instead it has a dynamic path parameter. And this is again Node Express code, which you don't need to understand. It has nothing to do with Angular, but what it means is that we should incorporate the ID of the place that should be deleted into the request path. So after user-places / we should have the ID of the place that should be deleted. And that's therefore the kind of request we need to send from the front end. Now, definitely feel free to implement this on your own with help of this remove user place method here. Make sure that this method gets triggered whenever a user clicks one of these places down here. And make sure that a delete request is sent to that path I just explained, and that the ID is part of that path. Also consider handling errors if something goes wrong there, and try implementing optimistic updating as we did it here. It's a nice exercise. After a short pause, which you can use to pause the video, we'll implement this feature together. So let's make these places removable. For this, to implement optimistic updating and to be able to roll it back, I'll start by copying this code from add place to user places down to remove user places. And here I now want to update my places array by removing the place which the user selected here. For that, I first of all want to check whether the selected place is part of my places. So I'll perform the opposite check of what I had up here. I want to check that the place is part of my previous places. If that's the case, I want to set my user places, and I want to set them to the result of calling privPlaces filter, where filter is another built-in method you can call on arrays. Filter, like all of these functions, takes a function as an input, which will be executed for every element in that array, and that will then be passed as an argument to this function. And we should then return true here if it's an element we want to keep in the new array, or false if it's not the case. And therefore here I want to check if the ID of the place we're currently looking at in this array is not equal to the ID of the place we selected for deletion. Because I want to keep the place if the IDs are not equal. If they are equal, though, it is the place I wanted to get rid of, and therefore filter should return false. So that will update the user places. Next, I want to send a delete HTTP request. And for this, I'll return this HTTP client delete. And the URL to which the request should be sent is http localhost 3000 / user-places. So this path. And then / and then the ID of the place. So / and then I'll concatenate the place ID here to add it to the URL. Now, just as before, I'll then add the pipe method to add some operators, or specifically here, one operator I want to add. I also want to catch errors, just as I did it when adding a place. So I want to catch any errors. And if an error occurs, I want to reset my user places. In addition, we can also use the error service to show an error message and say failed to remove the selected place, for example. And also say this down here, though this message is actually never shown anywhere. But this is important. Well, and that's almost it then. At least that's one way of implementing this. We now just have to make sure that this method gets called if a user clicks on a place down here. And therefore, we have to go to the user places component, to the template, and add that listener to the app places component and listen to this select place event, and then call a onRemovePlace method, or whatever you want to call it, and pass that $event variable to it so that we get that emitted event data from the select place event. And in the user places component class, maybe after ng-on-init, we can add this method, expect a place of type place as a parameter, and in here then use our places service and call the remove user place method and pass this place to this method. Just as before, this actually will give us a subscription, at least if we call subscribe here, which we should. And we should also clean up that subscription. Now we can then also add that observer object and listen to the next value or to errors, but if you're not planning to do anything with that information, you don't need to do that here. So I'll just subscribe like this. Well, and that should be all. If you now save that and you click on a place, it should be removed. And if you reload, it should stay removed. And just to also check this as well, if you go to app.js, and there you add an error to this delete route. So if you send back a 500 response and you restart that backend server, then you should actually see that if you try to delete one of these places down here, let's say the Sahara, it actually is re-added and I got this modal. So I can't delete it. Which makes sense because that is the behavior we want. And with that, I'll get rid of this error and restart again so that we got the working application again. If we now reload, deleting the Sahara down here should be straightforward and should work. And that's there for now the finished application where we have all these places and where we can add those places here without issues, and where we can also remove those places if we want to, and that all is powered by Angular's HTTP capabilities, where we use the HTTP client to send different kinds of requests, like the put request or the get requests, and where we can use observable features, like operators like catch, error, or map, to handle the data and the response that's sent back, and where we then finally can use the features you already learned about, like signals, to update the UI accordingly.